months. I mean,
Oh no, I mean,
So-
like in the beginning of the year, if you want, like whatever works for you, just email me. And I mean, not that my schedule's so
Gonna bug
big,
me.
I can't get out there
Anyway,
by two, right?
It,
But
it's
like,
been
if
it's been
it's-
a few years.
If it's
We
not
really
like,
need.
I mean, our
Actually,
application
he's been
period,
bowling with this
see,
guy
our
all week. The
application
other
period
guy from
opens
Campbell
on
that's wearing
Friday.
blue.
But I feel
Yeah.
like for stuff
Yeah,
that's like this,
he's
I'm
been
not
hanging out all week.
gonna
He's
have to
like I said, the players.
Right. Yeah, let's see what we're dealing with. Let's have
Yes.
a proposal, let's have a discussion.
Yes.
He's
That's
Yes.
kind of where I'm
Okay,
thinking.
and
the
then
biggest
that's,
problem
it's
is
also,
we
we need to, the first thing we need to do for us, is we have to get your land out.
You know,
That's something I should have talked about. We have to establish a farming track record, right? And farm service agency. So we can start, and it's easier to do it while it's.
So that, the land I'm talking about is not affiliated with the farm at all.
No, but we got it, that's all right. It'll have its own farming track record, because it's off, it's in a separate spot.
Okay.
It'll still be
Make
under
sure you
August,
get Cody's.
but it'll have
You
its
can
own
email me too, but
farming
just-
track. Yeah, that's really probably where we should start, because then you're eligible and you'll be solid.
Very cool.
Awesome.
It was nice to meet you both. I can.
Good to meet you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you for your meeting.
Thank you. Yes, sir, yes, sir. What's up,
Campo
man?
hit. Her buddy. He got his new goalie buddy is here.
Yeah, give me a holler, for sure. What do you guys got going on down there?
Yes.
Not too much. We'll see what we got going on.
I was just
See what we can make happen.
Yeah, what's going on, yeah.
How you doing? I'm Cody.
So maybe just one of those
You're
places.
nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Oh, right on. Yeah, another
Maybe our
tribe I've
souls
never been able to
connect
get to work with. I remember trying to get something going with Ryan McIntosh worked there for like a week, right? Maybe it was a year.
I don't even know.
It was a little while, but yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, so, yeah. What do y'all got going on?
Well,
We should leave. They got some-
I don't know. I just started with that in May. It might have been towards May. They're closer to start season. Yes, we're pretty much across the street. Yeah, it's 29 homes, then us, and then Torres. We are. We are. Yes, ma'am. Okay, well, nice chatting. Hope to see you later. Okay. Are you gonna come karaoke? Yeah. All right, I'll see you this later.
I think we have to check out my own. So, sometime today.
That's okay, right?
We were worried about it.
Well, I figured we would get it.
Or we could just. That's fine. Whatever you're more comfortable with. Just hold it in your hand.
Sorry, we're having microphone issues.
Just. That's it. We're just gonna hand it back and forth.
Okay.
Ready for us to start? Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So thank you for staying for the last session of today because it is late and I know we're tired at least. I'm sure you are too. My name is Heidi Brow from Paula Band of Mission Indians, and this is Alexis Wallach. And we're here just to talk about our drone program today. Basically, it's not working. If you can go to the next slide, that'd be awesome. Thanks. So here's a picture of our reservation, which is in San Diego County, so just a little north of here. There's a topography map to kind of give you guys the lay of the land for our area. We have a kind of wide river basin and then some mountainous areas surrounding it. And we also included a picture of many, many years ago. I think it was 1905. Yeah. And then one today that we took with our drone. So just one utilization that you can do if you have a drone program. If you go to the next one. So today we're going to cover basically how we went about setting up our drone program. So what our needs were, what drones we looked at, and most importantly, what the funding sources we used to pay for this, and the rationale for how we managed to do that with our grant funds. So hopefully that'll be useful for everyone. I'm try it. Oh, no, it's working. Cool.
All right.
All right. So now I'm going to pass it to Alexis, and she's going to get into the nitty gritty.
You're fine. Yeah, so again, we're basically just going to cover like which drone we picked, because there are a very wide variety, both in cost and performance. Which programs we've used it for, and then also some steps to help you actually get started with your drone program. So first is picking the right drone. You have to think realistically of what you're going to need, and think of the different functionalities of the drones. So some drones come equipped with cameras, video, others are just the drone, and then you have to make additional purchases to get them for what you want to do. So if you see the QR code in the bottom, that is where we got all of these, all this information. It's just a good quick, gives you a rundown of all the different types of drones. I'll give you guys a second to scan that. Oh, and also we are not affiliated with that website. So if it's weird, it's not my fault. I just took the drone information, that's all. Is it too small? Yeah, you'll get the slides, so. All right, so this is the first drone, or one of the drones that we got. So this is the small compact, it's a DJI. It comes equipped with a really good 4K camera, video. It's basically everything you need right out of the box. And it costs around $1,000, and it can go up or down a little bit depending on if you get a dedicated, the kind of remote you get, the batteries, whatever different packages you choose. So this is just an example of some of the pictures we've taken with the drone, and so for different projects that we've done. So, and this is the other drone that we purchased. So this is a big guy. It's almost 3 feet wide. It's got 8 propellers, and it can hold a payload of 17 pounds. So we purchased this one with the intent of getting air monitoring equipment and possibly a LiDAR. So that way we can do more heavy duty type projects with this drone.
That's not the camera, right? That's just the drone.
That's just, yeah, and just the drone was, and if you buy batteries or like higher capacity batteries, it will go over the almost $6,000. Yeah, no camera included on that one. So here's just some pictures of us being trained how to fly the big fancy drone. And then just back to Heidi.
Okay, so so these are just a few of the programs that we have used our drone for. Now we purchased both of those drones initially with EPA funds for specific purposes, but we have used them for basically all of our environmental programs, and a ton of other people within our tribe, so other tribal departments have also used them. So a lot of what we have done is used it for, so some of our programs are air and water, our solid waste program, our emergency response and planning program, our TIPO programs, our cultural program has used it. Also, our GIS department, we did work really closely when we were initially looking at what to buy. We worked with them so that with the intent that like that big beast one, we could eventually purchase stuff to do LiDAR and and to make sure that it would be useful for our GIS department, because in tribal departments, as you guys know, resources are very scarce. So it's really important to get as much bang for your buck as you possibly can. So, so that was our primary driver, to make sure that our GIS department could also utilize this. I think if you go to the next one, I'll pass that back to you.
Yes. So this is what you need to like actually start your drone program. You have to be FAA licensed to fly a drone commercially. Like what else did I? Sorry, I printed it out and it's tiny. Eyes aren't what they used to be. Oh yeah, and you also have to make sure you have your license, any SOPs to actually how you're going to run your drone program. Who can fly the drone? When can they fly it? What do you have to do before you fly the drone? Like notify your tribal law, for example. Also, you should obviously run it by your leadership so they know what's happening, and then also have a procedure for when do you need to notify tribal members. So are you flying it near their property? Are you, out in the sticks where no one lives? So you have to notify less people. Let's see. Sorry, my eyeballs are not working today. So to get your license, you have to go, like I said, through the FAA. There's many online training programs that can run you through the test prep. And then you go to an official testing facility and you take the test and then get your license. Oh, and that QR code, when you get the slides later, will take you to the FAA website that spells all of this out, and it tells you exactly what you need to do to get the license. So these are some helpful websites where you can learn about the testing, the requirements, and all of that information is laid out like explicitly. They make it very easy. And I included a fun map, or one of the maps that you get to learn how to read. They're not fun. I'm trying to encourage people. It's super fun. You get to learn about airspace and airport codes and how tall like different towers are and what weather clouds are called. It's a lot of fun. So then policies and procedures. Oh, so this is kind of what I was talking about before. You need to have a plan and take all of this into account. And also you need to think about the maintenance of your drone. There's going to need to be software updates, potentially buying new batteries or propellers and all of that stuff. And there's plenty of online resources to get to track your flights. Oh, yes. And for more.
So a few other things too with the policies and procedures. So developing your SOPs, it's very important to not only, check with your leadership of what's approved, your tribal law, your other departments, your community, but also putting that in an SOP really helps standardize this so that, what you know, because you've developed the program. But if you leave, or if some other if someone from another department comes and borrows your drone, which happens to us all the time, you're comfortable knowing that, well, these are the SOPs and the procedures. So this is what you're required to follow. So we purchased the drone, but if you're going to use it, this is how you're going to use it. And also logging the flights is really, not only is it essential, for the program, but honestly, it is super useful after the fact of when you're like, wait, when did we fly, this particular property? I need to get a picture of that water body. Where do we save that picture? And those, so you can go back to that log and be like, okay, I flew it August 15th. This is where I saved it. This is what it is. And so it saves a lot of time, or at least for me. Or even, it's like Alexis does most of the flying in our office, but I use a lot of those pictures. So, it enables me to always pop into the log and be like, when was that? And then I can easily find it within our, photo documentation stuff. I think that's Okay, so now we're going to go into a couple real world examples of how we've used the drone. Um, so this, let's see, this is kind of a laundry list of, and by no means is it complete. There's a ton of other reasons that we fly our drone. A lot of times, so we purchased it initially really for just environmental assessments that our office does, but we have used it for flying over trespass areas. We have, like sometimes there'll be issues where there's an encroachment issue and you don't want to necessarily, it's too remote to go out, or it's not as safe. So you can fly the drone. We've used it a lot for property inspections, and that can both be, like illegal dumping, solid waste issues, or homeowner properties. We just did one a couple weeks ago where it's so nice to fly a property and then to have that aerial later where you can sit down and be like, okay, so there's 5 junk cars, there's 2 RVs, there's a pile of junk. So it's so much easier to refer to that and have that visual. And before, when we would do this, it's like you'd go out and do the property inspection, take a million pictures, and then come back in and try to look at your old aerials, which some of them are newer than others and maybe better resolution than others. But when you have the drone, it's like, it saves so much time. It's great. We also use it a lot if the tribe purchases a new property and we have to go out and do the initial assessment to, like identify what's there, what kind of environmental issues are we going to maybe run into and need to tackle. And that information can also be used down the line for fee to trust, like that process, because that, like you really have to inventory everything that's on the property and know and have that history. So that's been really useful. We have used it often for grant applications. So we just submitted one earlier this year for like a habitat restoration site. So it's great. I was able to go out and take pictures, like basically before pictures, to kind of really catalog the extent of the erosion, issues that we have on this particular stretch of the river, and why, like it helps provide that visual for that application of like the need. I used it for a lot of grant reports, deliverables at the end of the day. Used it for habitat restoration, for like small projects, like we have a little community garden that we're trying to, get off the ground. So it's amazing how many different resources or different programs and, like different ways you can use the drone. Really, the sky is the limit. Sorry. Our office is full of puns. I didn't go to the next one. Yeah. Okay. So this particular slide, the real world example, this is what got us our first drone in the first place. So we had a creek that jumped out of its banks during one of our really large storms, and subsequently cut across our shooting range and into a community. We have video from the community of this brand new neighborhood, basically. I mean, it's less than 5 years old, beautiful. And we have videos of the kids in canoes. And this is San Diego County, mind you, right? We get like maybe 10 inches of precip a year in our area, max, So they're going down their street in a canoe. It's that much water that was like, had popped out. And so created a lot of erosion control issues. So I was able to, in my 319, my EPA 319 grant, and I reviewed this with my project officer, got approval beforehand, had to do a bit of, like additional explanation for why I wanted to purchase a drone to be able to fly and like appropriately and accurately catalog the extent of, like where the creek broke out of the bank and the erosion control issues that, followed. Because it zigzagged all the way through the community to another one of our creeks. So it went quite far, caused a lot of damage. So the page on the right was an explanation, like an additional explanation that I had to provide. And then I was able to, like part of it is just identifying what this was going to be used for. And I made sure that, and I'll talk about this a little bit later too, but I made sure that in that explanation, I not only, like solidified the need for this one particular grant, but also kind of expanded it to, we're purchasing this now, and this grant is paying for training, not just for me, but for our entire office and a few other, like our GIS department and a couple other people within our tribal administration who might be using this, and link the, like purchasing this grant to other environmental programs and to increase tribal capacity overall. And so that really helps kind of, swing it. Let's see. I think it's yours.
Yeah, so these are just some further examples. Like this is one of the orange groves on the reservation, and the chairman had asked us that we go, take some pictures and see how it was doing. So just getting the overall like lay of the property, see how the current conditions. This is we're putting in solar. So they needed some pictures of the roof to know whether they could mount the solar panels on the roof of a building. So this was for event planning. So they wanted to get a picture of how their booths were laid out for the annual gathering, so that way they can, based on how the event went, know whether they need to make some changes or not. So this one was for the our illegal dumping grant. So there's a creek downstream of this road, and you can kind of see in the middle there's like couches and various things dumped on the side of the road. And while this is like a pretty narrow, windy road, so it's kind of hard to pull over and take pictures and inspect. So we just flew the drone, a couple miles up the road, like a couple hundred feet up the road, so you could get a better idea when you're not able to really get out there on foot safely. So this one was also for the solar project. We needed to prove to the company providing the panels that we could store the panels in a safe place until they were installed. So this was on one of our properties. So we're just like, look, it's covered, it'll be safe. Let's see. And this one was for one of our GIS project. He needed, he was going to do an overlay of some mapping. So he just wanted some photos of the valley. So that's looking east toward Palomar Mountain with the river running down the side there.
So here's another example. And actually this one I pulled from before we purchased the drone. This really was a case of one of our tribal members who works in our administration building, he has a little drone. And so we did a cleanup a couple of years ago, or maybe it was, actually, I think it was before COVID, so long ago. Anyways, we did a cleanup, and we were on the ground cataloging all of the various waste materials. But and so like the before map is one of our aerials, and it, like it's good. It's a little bit grainy, but but after we had finished, so that I could, like throw in some, nice grant deliverables of after pictures, I asked our chairman's admin if he would mind, playing with his drone and taking a couple pictures. And it came out, like it was very useful for us, not just for like our own internal department and like, like trying, like we always try to push our own environmental successes within our office to our community and, share what we do and why it's important. But also, like we used it for grant deliverables afterwards. And that is what kind of started us thinking like, oh, maybe it would be useful for us to have a drone in our office that we could use for whatever came up, so that we're not just always, like popping down the hall and begging someone who may or may not want to do this, on their after work hours. So.
Yeah. So which drone do you think we've used more? The tiny one? Yeah, you're right. So that's another thing when you are coming up with a budget, you have to really think about which one, like how much capacity, like how much drone do you need? Because the big Mama Jamma is fun to fly and it can do a lot. But after buying the drone, it's like, oh, and LiDAR costs how much? And air monitoring equipment is how much? So you kind of have to think about that. So we will get use out of it, but we just have to wait till we have the funds available to do that. But then this little guy, I mean, like I said, he's under $1,000 and he takes great pictures. He's durable. So it's great. So lessons learned, like I said, you need to be realistic about your needs. Unless you have unlimited funds, it might be smart to start small and then grow from there. You also have to take into account the time it will take to get training. So I did an online course through Dart Drones, and I think I initially, in between all of the other work, took me maybe like 40 to 50 hours total to go through the training course, which was fine. And then I had to find out how to do the test and what else was needed. And then by the time I got around to actually scheduling and taking the test, I had to go back and study again because it had been a couple years. I'm going to blame it on COVID. It was around that time. Things got busy. It was a lot. But anyway, so it does take some time to go through all the things. And then once you get your license, and then you have to register your drones and all that. So it can take some time. So don't be like, we're going to buy a drone and fly it tomorrow. Technically you can, but technically not legally. If it's commercial, you have to have your license first. And also there's a learning curve. You're not going to get the fancy videos of it swooping through your valleys and your rivers first try. At least I didn't. I'm still working on it. And then sometimes you might get pushback from community residents. You'd be like, why are you flying this drone? What is it? Why are you looking in my backyard? It's like, we're not looking in your yard unless we're told explicitly to look in your yard for, for the inspections. And then sometimes you'll come across stuff you weren't really, maybe not you're supposed to see. And then you have to, a part of your policies is like, if I accidentally see something, what do I do? A lot of the times it's like, as long as it's not, like health and safety, you just kind of ignore it and maybe see what else you can figure out about that situation. But just something to be aware of. Sometimes you see things you're not supposed to. Oh, here's Heidi with the money.
Okay, so the money stuff, which is boring but very necessary. Okay, so grant funding. So when you get these slides, you can, I know they're small, you'll be able to read them closer. It's useful. So I listed a handful of different funding sources that I know will cover this, that are, that a lot of tribes use. So EPA has a bunch of them. Air 103, we use that funding source to purchase the smaller drone. So that's excellent. Also the EPA 106, so Clean Water Act 106 and 319, non-point source. Those two, that's where we used, the 319 source is what we used to purchase the big, huge drone. Sorry, it's the end of the day. Also, we use that source to purchase the in-person training that you saw some pictures of, which if you're going to get a huge, really technical drone, I would highly advise, it's worth it to pay for that because that is a lot more technical. And then also we use that funding source to pay for, I think, some of the licensing and taking the tests and stuff. And also I listed on here, although it's probably hard to see, but some of the activities that are allowable that I thought, might be useful to kind of use to justify your need for it. So if you're doing inventory of your water resources, you're developing a water monitoring plan, water quality assessments. If you are the language that I used was that when I had identified and accurately detailed the issue and the extent of it and developed BMPs and management techniques to deal with that erosion, that information would then go into our non-point source assessment report and management plan, which I write. So all allowable underneath, 319 funds. So that was a nice way to get it in. Most tribes in here probably have EPA GAP funds, and GAP is, for building tribal capacity, and having a drone within your program really increases your tribal capacity. So that is an excellent way to sell it. So you can spin it with, you're developing your map capabilities. You want to use it for emergency planning or response activities, for solid waste plans, like integrated solid waste management plans, which, I know that we've done that through GAP, developing tribal policies and SOPs for your department and other departments. You can spin it with like, I'm going to buy this drone and develop policies, and I'll share it with other tribes. And so you're not, like EPA loves it when you can share information and resources and tools with other tribes. So that's another good way. You can do it for conducting inspections and monitoring. All of these things, I think, could be useful ways of including it in your GAP work plan. Although I will defer to EPA people for, always check with your project officer. I'll just put that caveat. BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, has a ton of different programs that you could, like add, purchasing a drone and getting training as a line item within it. Their natural resource program, their solid waste program to like catalog waste, illegal dumping. You could do, there's like habitat restoration programs, like this is perfect for that. The climate resiliency program is another one because you could kind of spin it into like emergency management or like, like inventorying your resources and kind of spin it within a resiliency kind of way. So there are ways to do this, and we're happy to share language too. There's also, I know that so I had a Bureau of Reclamation, so BOR Water Smart grant. Actually, I have a couple, but I had included the drone in it for like purchasing LiDAR, although we went a different way, but purchasing it to do vegetative health studies. So there's a lot of different resources out there. You're just gonna have to think outside the box. I think. Oh, the other thing. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Sorry, I'm like, so this is like a cut and paste out of the specific task that I used for my 319 to justify it. So I thought that might be useful. And the language in the darker box is some other kind of ways to justify, like purchasing a drone for, like whatever programs. It's useful to, like, you always want to tie it to your standalone program. So whatever the actual grant is. But then also, as I said before, if you can make the argument to link it to, like using it for other environmental programs within your department or other tribal departments, also like your GIS department, your economic development kind of can be a little, we use it for that, but linking it to like your GIS department or other, like if your housing department does inspections, you can link it with, like there's lots of ways to kind of sell it. So the more, the more you can link it to a multiple projects or multiple programs, the more likely it is that you will get it funded. The other thing too is if you can share the cost of purchasing it, either in multiple grants or with another department. So, we definitely could have split the cost with our GIS department. So the GIS department is paid out of our tribal budget. So like if you have a grant that has a match, you could buy the drone partially with your grant funds, and then the other part could be paid by your tribal budget, like your tribal GIS department, and then you could use it for a match. Or, so there's a lot of ways to, like to think about it. And honestly, they're not super, like as long as you're not getting like the beast ones, they're not super expensive now. So, it's pretty easy to justify. And always link it to increasing tribal capacity, because that is an excellent way to sell it. So I think.
Yeah, and also I was going to say, as far as buying a drone, you can get a really decent one on Amazon for like $200. It may be not, DJI or brand name, but they make really good drones for cheap. You can get DJIs for $200. So, shop around, see what you can find. And then also I've had a couple people I was talking to earlier saying they've been hiring people to fly drones for them, which is, great. But then also if you can do it yourself, you'll save yourself money in the long run. It might be a time and a cost output, but in the end, it'll be a lot better for you guys, building capacity. And then also potentially other people, other tribes who haven't gotten there can, hire your services. And so you can help out other surrounding tribes. Also, Daryl, did you have anything? Daryl also works in our department, is my general co-pilot. Anything, Dad? You're good? Any questions? Do we have a microphone? Thank you.
we should mention that we're happy to share templates.
Oh yeah. If you need any of our templates or information, reach out. We'll share anything and everything.
Okay, that takes care of one question because I was going to ask for your SOP.
Yeah.
I guess another question on that because our legal counsel, keeps asking or thinking that we need additional approvals from the BIA to fly on trust lands. Not something you guys have experienced. Okay.
Nope.
Also good to know. And then you mentioned you ended up going about getting LiDAR data a different way. Can I ask about that? Because I actually wrote that in my gap plan this year was to, I wrote it in to work with a contractor instead because I knew it was going to be expensive to kind of do it on our own to just get someone else to fly.
Yeah, so we ended up, because we were on a little bit of a time crunch and it took us a while to get certified and get our stuff up and running, we ended up purchasing, we went through a company and purchased the LiDAR.
Mm-hmm.
They had them fly it, and I paid for it partially out of a BOR grant because it was in there for that. And then partially, I believe that the tribe paid for a good chunk of it, and I used it for like an in-kind match for another drought program.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice thing about it's like, you have to be careful about not duplicating like your deliverables or your grant tasks and stuff. But sometimes with some of at least for like the water drought projects that I work on, they can be so big that it's like I'm just doing a small portion of it for this grant and then using this slight portion over here. But yeah, so we went through a company for that. I do think that I'm trying to close out the BR grants that I have, hopefully sooner rather than later, and then maybe go after some additional funding, maybe through there or BIA to actually purchase some equipment to do the LiDAR internally. So.
Okay. And so you said you used the LiDAR for vegetation. Was it?
Yeah, so it was through, I'm trying to think of, I could probably talk
Offline. Okay.
off, yeah, because it's like the NDVI.
I know that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
Do you use that one later?
This is kind of a weird one. Our tribal council, or maybe administrator, I'm not sure where the line is drawn, they are worried that our drone would be shot down. What is a good way to reassure them? I mean, maybe it is a valid concern. I don't know.
What's your experience?
So we have not been shot at. The drone has not been shot at. Yeah, so I would say the best way to alleviate like the public, your community's concerns is to flat out tell them what you're doing.
Mhm.
Be like, if they're super concerned, you can be like, I don't know, put out a notice somehow of like, on Tuesday, the 32nd, we are flying the drone in this neighborhood. You caught that, right? Yeah. So on this date, we're flying the drone in this neighborhood to look at X, Y, Z. We are not looking in your houses. We are not looking in your backyards.
Mhm.
So we haven't had any pushback from tribal members at all. Before we fly, we usually call tribal law and say, hey, I'm flying over the creek to get video of whatever. So, I mean, you know your community best, but I think just being flat out and saying we're flying here on this date, we're not looking in your windows, will hopefully be enough to alleviate their concerns.
I was gonna say, I think the we've had like stream gauge, very expensive, like cost like 15 grand to replace it. That kind of equipment shot out numerous times, but honestly, that stuff is like, it's like a, it's just there and it's calling to people. So like people are more likely to like they see it every day and they're like, oh, I got an idea, So one time, that they see something in the sky, they're probably, they're less likely to go after it. So.
You said that you'll notify the community before you go and do these. How do you notify the tribal community, the tribal members, and the people who live on the reservation? Because that's something I think about when wanting to do drone mapping, environmental site assessments, creating a burn plan, all types of things like that. How do you reach out to those tribal community members?
So it depends on like how much time, like notice you have beforehand. because you can make like a flyer and put it out in like the mailer, or we have like mailboxes that tribal members have, so we can put a flyer into the mailbox and be like, you know, when we're flying and what we're doing. If it's like shorter notice and it's not directly about houses, we'll just call tribal law and be like, hey, we're flying. If anyone is concerned, you know, have them reach out to me. We can also do like social media, be like, by the way, we're flying the drone here. And so far we haven't had any trouble with it, but.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's some tribes have like a notification system that they use, kind of like emergency management, but for like non-emergency stuff. So that would be another option.
Hi. Are both of you FAA certified, or is it just one person on the team who is?
Currently, it's just me.
So not everyone.
So not
has to be.
everyone has to be. So with FAA law, as long as the certified pilot is there, like Daryl could fly it or Heidi could fly it, as long as I'm there to make sure they know what they're doing.
Okay.
So yeah.
So the training that your team attended, can you go into a little bit more detail of what that covered?
Yeah, so the Dart drones training, so it was an online self-guided training. So it's basically going over all of the laws and the regulations for the FAA license. It was the Part 107, I think they call it.
Yeah, Part 107.
Yeah, so basically the Dart drones just went over the rules and the regulations of the law to get certified. And then the in-person training was separate, and that was how to physically fly a drone.
So I assume though that all that is covered in your SOP or your policy, like the training that the non-certified person has to go through and the classes they have to take. So that's all covered in your policy. I feel I feel the amount of work that has gone into this, and I feel like you've kind of just touched on it lightly.
Yeah.
We've been trying to get some certified pilots in our department for probably the better part of a couple of years.
Okay.
A lot of that has been focused around the policy that we've had to have in place, and our police department operates drones. And so, you know, we were kind of working on things separately, and then they got some supposed approval of council. So then ours now has to kind of get modified to fit theirs. One of the hangups that we found is personally identifiable information. So the police department doesn't have a long-term mandate to keep that information. I think it's like 90 days maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But as a regulatory agency, when we're doing compliance and enforcement, and we want to use that for, you know, ag field inspections or whatever, we might come across personally identifiable information. And, you know, we had to kind of work through how that was going to kind of flush itself out, because in the police department's policy, it's 90 days max.
Mm-hmm.
But how does that apply with our records retention policy, which is 5 years? So I don't know if you guys have had to work through some of that stuff. I know you talk about flying over, you know, maybe seeing things you didn't want to see. Is that covered in your policy, where it's like, okay, if we happen to shoot this footage, because now you have evidence, and you talked about, you know, what do we do with that? Are you
Right.
working that into your policy?
I think we maybe need to. So short answer, no. But our department isn't regulatory in that. I mean, maybe you can answer this better.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, so short answer is no, we don't have that in our SOP. And we don't have anything within our department that's specifying a length of time to keep any of our documentation, our inspections. I mean, honestly, we have kept them in perpetuity. We have them going back many decades. We do have a records retention policy, which maybe we could, you know, like, I mean, that tends to have more to do with, you know, like financial grant documentation, other kind of office records. But that is an excellent point, and I think that we will probably go back and, you know, kind of take that to maybe kind of look at that a little bit more. The other thing too is that the intention when we started this was that everyone who went through the online program and the in-person program, so that includes myself, we were all supposed to get FAA certified, and we still are. Our boss, you know, hassles us from time to time. Are you guys certified yet? And it's no, but it's true. It does take some time, and when you are, you know, sometimes busy, you just rely on lovely coworkers to just, you know, do all the flying. But I do hear what you're saying with the length
Yeah,
time.
no, yeah, the pictures are awesome. And when you get these aerial pictures, you're like, man, that's cool. I'm going to get a drone. But then when you actually think about all the work that you have to put into that, doing your flight plans, getting that approved, planning out. I mean, it's just, there's so much work involved in this. That's, you know, sometimes it takes a lot of resources.
It does. Cause I think we originally started this, I want to say like 2017, 18,
No, I think it was after. It was like
right before COVID. Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
was like 2020. That's right.
yeah, because we trained with masks.
Yeah, because our first training was masked. That's right. But since we've been having this going for a few years now, I think it's definitely time to relook at our SOP and take that into consideration, because there's a possibility your tribe might want you to get like extra insurance or have extra like safeguards for this data and stuff. We haven't come across that yet, but we're it is on my to-do list to look at the SOP and reread it and make sure everything still makes sense. Any other questions? Any questions online? Is anybody online? Hi, online people. So I'm being called out now. So I gave this presentation at TLEF a couple months ago, and I had recently tested the safety mechanisms on the drone and the obstacle avoidance. And apparently our drone does not see very thin, spindly dead trees. And I got my drone stuck in a tree. So that's another thing you have to take into, you can possibly put in your SOP. What do you do when your drone is stuck in a tree? I do not recommend walking through a riverbed in sandals and getting blisters all over your feet just to find the drone. It's like maybe like 60, 80 feet up in the air in a tree and just being like, okie dokie, that's a Monday problem. So just things to, you know, sometimes stuff happens and you learn and you become a better pilot, hopefully. Don't rely on those obstacle avoidance systems.
Yeah.
This isn't a question, it's just a comment. Just so you know, apparently that happens a lot, especially when testing the object avoidance, because the DART drones instructor we had for our 2-day course we did in August, he literally did the same thing.
Oh, good.
He flew
I
it
feel
into
so
a
much
tree.
better.
Yeah, so
it's not just me.
And he's the certified instructor and everything, so don't feel bad.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and then like I said, there's plenty of opportunities of free online tutorials for the test, and then also paid. So Dart Drones, not sponsored or anything, unfortunately. They have in-person, online. I was actually this past weekend supposed to be up in Seattle doing a mapping training, but it got canceled or postponed. So there's a lot of options, both free and paid, to like get this training. You don't need to pay a dime to get training if you don't want to. And also, for me, the test was pretty easy, but it depends on like how well you take tests. So, but, and you know, that's an extra expense. I think taking the test itself was like $250. But, oh.
I wanted to make another comment because I work with them. Recently, we found other uses for our drone. We're doing a microgrid project on the reservation, and we also were doing assessments on energy efficient items per building, like the air handlers, like the HVAC systems on the roof, lighting in the ball field. The drone has been very beneficial in helping us identify a lot of these things without climbing up on a roof
or having the fire department put a ladder out for us. So dude, we're finding more and more uses for it on the daily.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Sorry, it's late in the day. Probably had too much coffee. All right.
Thank you.
Also, don't forget that the costume party and karaoke is at 6 o'clock.